you have been given credit over the years for the stand that you and that Canada took on the apartheid regime. Before I get to the specifics, what was it in your life that made you feel so passionate about that issue? Because, I mean, there's being against apartheid and there's being against apartheid. Mm-hmm. What was it in your life that made you convinced you had to do that?
Well, when I was a young progressive conservative, I can remember being in Ottawa at the Chateau Laurier when Prime Minister Diefenbaker came back from the Commonwealth Conference, having urged the expulsion of South Africa from the Commonwealth precisely because of the apartheid policy. And Joe Clark and I and others were out there waving flags, welcoming Dief back to Ottawa. It was a great moment.
I've made it very clear that Canadians as a whole unequivocally deplore the practice of apartheid.
So I remembered that, of course, but also, Peter, if Canada, middle power, doesn't stand for human rights and the defense of human rights and individual liberties, what do we stand for? And so when I came in, it occurred to me that after Mr. Diefenbaker, Canada's support for Mandela and this kind of thing was rather tepid and inconsistent with our fundamental values. So we set a new course where we would use the G7, the Commonwealth, le Sommet de la Francophonie, and the United Nations at all times and in all circumstances to promote the interests of Nelson Mandela, his freedom, the legalization of the ANC, and the emergence of the end of apartheid and the emergence of South Africa as a multiracial democratic state. That was our priority. And we did all kinds of things, beginning with the appointment of Stephen Lewis, which was an unusual appointment, to the United Nations, where he did a fabulous job and highlighted this enormous problem. Then we took it step after step. Joe Clark did a fabulous job in this. And we finally got it done with the Commonwealth. But that's why I felt that it was a travesty and a shame that we were not doing more, and I determined we would.
But you sat across the table from people who felt in the 1980s still that Mandela was a terrorist, that he was a communist, that there should be no deal made with him. And some of these people were not only friends of yours, but people in many ways you looked up to, and obviously Margaret Thatcher being one of them. Did you really have to say at one point to her, Margaret, you're on the wrong side of history?
Absolutely. That's one of the kinder things I said. She was pretty ferocious, believe me. And I'll spare you what she said to me.
No, please, don't spare me.
No, it was a very vigorous exchange. Like, for example, Margaret would say things like, "Well, Brian, you don't understand that Nelson Mandela is a communist." And I say, "Well, Margaret, how do you know that? He's been in jail for 27 years. Did he call you? Have you been talking to him now? Did he tell you that? Because if you're saying that simply because communist regimes around the world are helping him, financially and other ways for the ANC, they're doing that because you refuse to help. So he's looking for friends elsewhere. And if I were in jail for 27 years, I'd be grateful for that support, and you'd probably be saying of me that I'm a communist when I get out. But Margaret, I'll bet you $1 to a donut right now that when Nelson Mandela walks out of that jail, he's no more of a communist than you or me or Ronald Reagan." So I said, "I fear that you are placing your nation on the wrong side of history. And all I'm concerned about is making certain that Canada turns out to have been on the right side of history on this great moral challenge."
Did she ever change her mind in a way that she came to you and said, you were right about that?
No, but in lunches and travels after, she said to me things like, "Well, Brian, did you find me a little too vigorous on on the issue?" And I said, "I didn't find you vigorous. I simply found you wrong."
Some have raised, including the former Governor General Adrian Clarkson, that you should have been on that podium yesterday, sharing your feelings and your remarks at the memorial.
Well, look, Peter, I just came here to say goodbye to Nelson Mandela, that's all. And I was happy to be there. Whoever the organizing committee was, they organized it in difficult circumstances.
But Canada has a place on that stage at a time of remembering
Yeah.
how he became what he became after he left prison.
Well, it's up to them to decide who they want to hear from on a day like that. As I say, I was just honored to be part of the Canadian delegation being there.
If you had been there, you know what you would have said?
Yeah.
What would you have said?
Yeah. Well, one thing that John Kretzy and I were talking about is that we said privately to him, Nelson, don't let them hold any ceremony in a huge stadium, because you never can tell what the weather's going to be like. You want to make certain you've got the joint full. So Jean and I had a good time talking about the chit chat we'd have with Nelson. But no, I would simply have remembered the fact that he was one of the genuine greats of history. Genuine greats of history. And I was privileged to be in his company.
You talk about the moment with Jean Chrétien. This is an unusual time because you've got a bunch of prime ministers, former prime ministers together on the flight over, the long flight over from Canada. We've seen
17
pictures,
hours.
17 hours. There's probably more time than you've spent with any of those people over the years.
It's a long time.
But we've seen the official photographs of all of you sitting together on the plane. When the cameras were away, like, do you have things in common?
Oh, sure. We had the Prime Minister led a very interesting discussion. We talked about international politics, really. We talked about our personal experiences growing up in Canada, how different they all were, and how Canada is so different today from what it was in, for example, Chrétien's childhood and mine in rural Quebec, as opposed to what you see evolving now, and the improvements in Canada, and how proud we all were in our own ways of having been able to shape the country so that we have this magnificent Canada today.
You know, the presidents have that former president's club in the United States. We don't have anything like that, do we?
No.
Should we have?
Not that I'm aware of.
It's a club you haven't been invited to.
I haven't been invited to yet.
Did the current situation with the current Prime Minister come up at all? In the troubles he's had this year on the Senate issue?
No, because compared with some of the troubles that I had, this is a piece of cake. So, and Chrétien as well. So we just thought he was doing great. No trouble at all.